It is historical moment. Hungary has chosen Europe. 16 years of the regime is over. That's only a couple of quotes from the headlines that we've seen following the last weekend's historical elections in Hungary. But what really comes and goes with those elections, what is the meaning for Hungary, for Hungarians, for Europe, for the Europeans? This is something we are going to discuss at this very special episode of the European Progressive Observatory. My name is Anja Skrzypek. I'm Director for Research and Training, and I will be very privileged to host this debate, which is featuring a fantastic lineup of speakers. Esther Kovac, who is a PhD and political scientist. Between 2009 and 2019, she's been working on several Central and Eastern European gender equality programs in Friedrich Ebert Foundation. But now she's mostly related with academia, with University of Vienna, University of Humboldt in Berlin. And she spent a great degree of time looking and trying to unpack what the illiberal narrative means when it comes to gender war. Esther, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's a very busy period for you. And this conversation would have never been completed if not having with us Katarina Barley, who is the Vice President of the European Parliament, a very engaged and passionate fighter when it comes to freedom and democracy, a member of several observation missions and delegations to Hungary during this very long 16 years, Vice President of the Party of European Socialists, a lawyer, and a former Minister of Justice, so ideal person to really hear from when it comes to the European perspective. Katarina, thank you so much also for finding the time to join this episode. And last but not least, everything that is going to be said in here will be followed by a splendid commentary by László Andor, who is the Secretary General of FEPS, Hungarian from origin, European Commissioner in the previous professional life. And if you haven't done that just yet, please do not hesitate to check his first reaction, which has already been published on the FEPS website. Now, I'm going to ask very short questions to get the conversation going, but I know that this episode of the European Progressive Observatory has been anticipated with a great excitement, pairing the excitement of finding out what the news from Budapest would be on Sunday night. So I know that there are many amongst you who are joining not only to listen, but also to ask questions. Do not hesitate to do it in the comments, and those questions will be asked to the speakers. And with this very, very prolonged introduction, Esther, how do you feel? What's the first reaction after what happened on Sunday?
I mean, this was a landslide victory. I wouldn't say we didn't expect it, but still we were a bit surprised and overwhelmed by the fact that 16 years are over, and surprised by how easily and gracefully Orbán conceded his defeat, which was not predicted by many. And basically, we were happy that all the fears projected previously proved to be unfounded about how the elections will not take place, will be postponed, a defeat by Fidesz would not be accepted. So that part is one of the interesting things, but obviously it will need a lot more analysis what these 16 years were and what Tisza did differently than previous opposition parties, what structural, personal, organizational factors explain its victory, and of course what comes next.
And how does it look from the perspective of Europe? I mean, indeed, 80% of Hungarians went to the polling stations. From 199 seats, it's projected that Tisza is going to land with 138. Viktor Orbán says, we will serve as the opposition. So, Katarina, is that this long awaiting moment of the breakthrough? How can we read it from Brussels' perspective?
Well, first of all, congratulations to everyone in Hungary or abroad who contributed in any way to this very special outcome. I mean, I was expecting a victory, but not in this clarity. And I think the significance of what happened goes far beyond Hungary, because I mean, I've often said Orbán is a diabolic genius. He managed to really keep the structure of democracy and really, well, carve out anything that has to do with democracy inside of it. So with this, that it is possible to overturn such a government in a peaceful way, in a democratic way, with nothing more than election campaign and election. That is something that is really remarkable from a democracy perspective. Hungary, Orbán was the most sophisticated example of how you can form an illiberal democracy. And so it's really, really very remarkable. I hear that Esther is optimistic when it comes to Orbán. She probably knows him better. I'm not Hungarian. I am not. I don't trust him still. He did say very early that he lost these elections and that he will serve as opposition, but he still has a lot to lose. I mean, his corruption is obscene, and if everything goes as it goes in the rule of law, then he will be held accountable for that. I don't think he wants that, and I don't think he wants to make the life easier for the new government. So I don't trust him. I still think he has some ammunition stored somewhere, and so. And we haven't talked about yet about this being a victory for democracy, but not for social democracy. I think we have to be very much aware that Hungary is now, the Parliament of Hungary now consists of a right-wing conservative, an illiberal democrat, if that exists, and right-wing extremists. So fantastic that the Hungarian people were able to overturn this government. But let's see where we're going to go for the next years.
Let's come back to the question of what's next in just a second. But if I can take us back to what seems very long ago, but it was just last Sunday, namely the moment the campaign finished. And if you both could share a little bit how this campaign looked from your perspective. I mean, Katarina, I would like to start with you because, I mean, one of the aspects that we have seen is the attempt of an interference, J.D. Vance very nervously arriving to Budapest. Of course, a lot of the organization of the radical, and you called it illiberal forces behind. Is that really the campaign that has been as sort of dynamic, if not to say even brutal at places, also featured different moments of gates and scandals. Is that because you are a little bit cautious, I feel, if that is the victory of democracy that we have been waiting for? So how is this campaign now assessed when it comes to those global movements in the European context of trying to preserve and indeed a right of a sovereign nation to have a democratic choice?
Well, it's probably what most of us enjoy most, not most, but close to most, that J.D. Vance arrived a few days before the elections, and all these illiberals said, you have to vote for Orbán, otherwise the world is going to end and you're going to be in war and your life is going to be miserable. And still all these people, this amazing turnout, close to 80%, and these amazing results, they didn't manage to break the spirit that was there. And that is really remarkable, because fear is such a strong emotion, and they really did everything. Orbán did everything to scare people of the outcome when they vote for Magyar. So but the other aspect, and analyzing the campaign itself, probably the Hungarians in the digital room are more in the position to do that. In a lot of senses, this has been a unique setting. I mean, the candidate actually being politically very close to the prime minister, and then knowing all his weaknesses and exploiting them. But what I think is something that we have to look at is this mixture between a very centralistically organized campaign and this at least feeling of a grassroots movement. So this is a very interesting combination, which I perceived as being very attractive. That you have on the one hand someone where he knows all about governing, although he hasn't been active like a minister or something, but he knows politics. But on the other hand, this extremely fresh attitude involving all those people, I think this is something that, as far as I can see, it led to this result.
Indeed, the people seem to have been determined for change. So what were the issues that actually shaped this campaign, Esther? Because we know that being pro and anti Orbán or Tisza was one of the aspects, but there were several other questions that the campaign raised, right?
Yes, just very briefly, I would like to react to what Katarina said about my optimism and trust in Orbán. I would not like to have. I hope I didn't make this impression so strongly. I just said that he has some sort of either knowledge that actually he cannot fight against the majority, or he doesn't have the resources to keep his power. So he used those resources until the last moment with using secret services against the opposition candidate, with all the fear, what you were mentioning, and a lot of things. But at some certain point, he said, okay, I lost. And definitely he will try to make life hell for the opposition, what he can do. And he will reorganize Fidesz, or Fidesz will need to reorganize itself. We will see how it is. Nevertheless, why I said this, because this is one part of the outcome. It's not just Tisza won and Fidesz lost, but that it gives us something to think about, that Orbán could be ousted by elections, and he accepted the result. So many of the people didn't expect it this way also. How the campaign went with the false flag operations and with all the violence of the last weeks, that it can come. That was just what I wanted to say. As for the campaign, I agree totally with Katarina Barley on this interesting mixture of a centralized campaign machine and a grassroots movement, the so-called Tisza movement, Tisza Islands. So these small groups around the country, tens of thousands of people, very active. And if you went to the rallies, you could feel the vibe of, people were not having fear. And, it also in constituencies which were very much Fidesz dominated previously. There were a lot of people all around all the time and organizing. Definitely we had two campaigns actually, one by Magyar focusing on the domestic issues and on the failure of the state. So basically he managed to connect the concerns of the people and everyday struggles and housing crisis and livelihood crisis with the failures of Fidesz, with the corruption, with non-governance, with failed economic policies and so on. He avoided the traps what Fidesz were trying to give, like drawing him into the culture war issues, making him say something about LGBT, about migration, about Ukraine, talking about rule of law issues. He just didn't. So all the things which could divide the people, which could go into a direction which is favorable of Fidesz or was favorable in the recent years, he just avoided it. And that was the first campaign, a very concentrated domestic focus campaign, and the Fidesz one, which was the geopolitical anxiety. You should fear. The world is an insecure place, and I will save you from that insecurity. I will save you from that danger, and only I can save you. Whereas the other side is drawing you into the war and into this horrible things that can happen. And apparently, it it reached its peak or it reached its borders. But Hungary used to be and still is very, very polarized, very different. We live in two different realities. So it's not that it switched from one reality perception and one majority to another one. Tisza had 3.1 million voters, Fidesz had 2.2 million voters. So it's not a complete, it's just that Tisza had more. But I think that will be one of the big challenges of the next months and years if this polarization can be overcome. And but definitely the J.D. Vance's visit or also Putin endorsing Orbán and all the phone calls leaked in the last weeks by the Western secret services to the media between Lavrov and Foreign Minister Szijjártó or between Orbán and Putin, they didn't help their narrative that they are the safe choice, whereas Tisza is the chaos. Tisza and Péter Magyar could transmit the message, we are the security. And look around, Orbán makes alliances with all the leaders over the world who make chaos. Like Orbán was talking about Trump all the time as the peace president, and that peace president started a war in Iran several weeks before the election. So I definitely wouldn't be able to explain the campaign and the success of Tisza by one aspect, but it will be a lot more research needed, how the voters were moving and what were the decisive factors. But I think that those parts of the electorate who decided were more mobilized by the material questions and the material economic questions, what Magyar did. And this is a big blow for Social Democrats that a right-wing conservative candidate can make economic campaign and win the elections with that.
I think indeed that's an interesting question. That is why in 2022 the United Opposition had 34%, and now it arrived. The Tisza arrived to 53.6. That's one of the issues that I see being hinted at. But I see both yourself, Esther, and Katarina really willing to tap into the question of what about center left. Let's then front load it now. So what about center left during the campaign? What happened to Social Democrats and progressive movements? I mean, we've seen at the different moments of the recent Hungarian political history different shapes of that. We've all been cheering up for the elections in Budapest not that long ago. So what happened to the progressive potential? Esther?
Probably I would start by what happened to the center left until 2024 and what happened to them after that. I mean, just very, very briefly that we had the Hungarian Socialist Party, MSP, and then the splitter party Democratic Coalition, DK. They were also competing among each other, but definitely the leftist scene was dominated by the person of Ferenc Gyurcsány, who was prime minister between 2004 and 2009. And who was a very polarizing figure. People either adored him or hated him, but he was definitely, he kept the Hungarian opposition in hostage, and many voters who would have been ready for an anti-Orbán big coalition didn't like it, because if Ferenc Gyurcsány is there, then it cannot be elected. That was also the experience of 2022, that the whole opposition, including Jobbik, the former far-right, a bit right-wing center party by then, 1 million voters of Jobbik just didn't go and didn't vote for the united opposition because they couldn't vote for Gyurcsány or that ticket. So I think that is one part of the thing, but also the structural reasons should be mentioned, even if we cannot explain them in detail at this point. But between 2013 and 2019, there was growth, there was a world economic boom, and there was this social contract in Hungary that as long as it trickles down, people tolerate corruption. So real wages were growing, inflation was low, unemployment was decreasing. Many people felt like, a bit of having a bit better life year by year. Minimum wages were increasing. And when Peter Magyar appeared 2024, it was already for 2 years that the Hungarian economy was in recession. The inflation was record high in Europe, real wages decreased, and so on. So definitely this is one part of the issues that even the best social democrats couldn't mobilize. I mean, I don't know who were the best, but social democrat. But in era of economic conjuncture and living a bit better than yesterday, it was very difficult to mobilize against Fidesz. And 2024 in February, when there was this clemency scandal, so basically a moral scandal for Fidesz, which had written on his flag, they are for families and for children, and the president, who was the face of the family policy and family orientation of Fidesz, was debunked as having signed a clemency to a child abuse helper, so to speak. So that was a big blow for Fidesz, but it was very quickly visible. The old opposition is already discredited, and the Hungarian people don't want from them. There was a big demonstration organized by simple influencers in February against this clemency scandal, and 150,000 people went to the Hero Square. And some days later, the old opposition parties organized a demonstration, and 1,500 people went there. I say this because that was also very visible, a very visual proof of the old opposition not being wanted by people who actually want change. And these things, the economic conditions, the moral crisis of Fidesz, and the political vacuum was where this skilled politician entered and started to build up its movement. And I think MSP decided not to run in the elections in February, or announced it at least. DK ran, we know, but they achieved 1.15%. But basically, since Magyar entered the scene in February-March 2024, their support radically went away. So Magyar managed to run against all the old opposition. He even said from the beginning, it's not just an Orbán era, but it's an Orbán-Gyurcsány era, and we need to get rid of both. So he made no compromises with the old opposition, and it worked. So apparently all the voters of MSP and DK went towards him, and he was credible in his material messages. And he also could speak to the former and disillusioned Fidesz voters with his national language and with his economic agenda. And DK in the campaign didn't play a very nice role. DK said we need a strong leftist voice in the parliament, whereas the only message they communicated, or that was at least visible on posters and in the media, was that their main message was we have to get away or take away the suffrage, the voting right, from the Hungarians living abroad. Because we know that they vote mostly for Fidesz, but that was their main leftist message in the campaign. And actually they became also a bit the victim of their own former strategy, because they were very vocal in the last elections that everybody in 2028 and 2022 that everybody should vote for the strongest opposition candidate, no matter which party it belongs to. You should put away your value base, your interests. We need to get rid of Orbán. And now that happened to them. that even people who are more social democratic or who think, okay, Klára Dobrev or DK would be more a guarantee of democracy than Péter Magyar, a formerly Fidesz guy with probably unsympathetic personality traits, still they voted for the change against Orbán and voted for the most for the candidate which had the most chance to win against.
Indeed, during the campaign, there were two different modalities because MSZP said we will not run, and also the party said there will be a strategic vote, and the most important goal is the change of the regime. On the other hand, we had the DK that stood and ran for the elections. For the Party of European Socialists, of course, both the sister parties have been supported with the different messages of solidarity. But Katarina, you said at the very beginning that whilst we cheer for the outcome, of course, for the European Social Democrats, that's also a little bit of a bittersweet moment. So I'd like to sort of maybe ask for your comment, especially that it often comes to this reflection that in Central and Eastern Europe, social democracy is weaker, that we see this right-wingization of the political spectrum. So how do we go further from there? Because going back is not an option. So what is the way forward?
Well, of course, I see this more from an outside perspective. So I think we have to assess that we have a general tendency in elections, not in every country, but in more and more, to have a polarization and this situation of one-on-one. I can say that for my country, for example, for the last elections that happened in the States, on the state level, and we have the right-wing extremists there. It will happen in other elections to come. That it comes to a he or she or he or he. There's very rarely a she or she, but and this is a situation where very often all the others are crushed. That happens very often. So I think once it was clear that the only candidate able to really beat Orbán is Péter Magyar, it would all focus on him. I do not think that this necessarily means that all the others do not have support in the population. But now this is the question for the time to come, because we all cheered for, including me, for the victory of Tisza. And but now also we have to make clear, and I think there will be a lot of opportunities to make clear what I said in the beginning, this is going to be a very, very conservative government. And yes, also very conservative governments can give help, social aid to especially families. A lot of them do this to strengthen the traditional role of women. Well, yeah, yes, that does happen. Yeah, the more you reward. That's what's happening in the US at the moment. They consider giving benefits, but not to help families, but to have people have women stay at home, and take on the traditional role. They're trying to exclude women from the voting process. I think it's very, very good to have a close look at what is happening in the US, because some developments are really going there fast forward, so to speak. I don't know if that holds true for Tisza. I don't. I mean, he hasn't expressed himself on all the policy matters that are relevant, and we will see what will come out of it. But even there are right-wing extremist parties in Europe that are more on a sort of social side, who do and more, some that are neoliberals. This is also one of the reasons why we do not have one big right-wing extremist parliamentary group in the European Parliament, because they do disagree on some things, also, of course, on foreign policy, but also on this. So I think the challenge for the future, especially in Hungary, but not only, will be to say, yes, now we do have achieved a democratic clarity that we are capable of taking back control as a people, taking it back from an illiberal authoritarian leader. Now, what are we going to do with it? Of course, we will have a period of time now where only Tisza is ruling, and that can be an advantage because he cannot blame any failure on any coalition partner. What we're going to see now is Tisza policy. So I really hope that whichever left movement, be it MSP, be it DK, be it another new party evolving, I don't know, but that we will see some opposition outside the parliament in a left with a left mindset. You touched upon the problem that we see in a lot of Eastern European countries, social democracy not being successful. I wouldn't say progressive policy not being successful, because we do have this sort of new parties that pop up, especially in Slovenia, before every election, and then being successful, that are more, that we would see in a renew surrounding, which are sometimes more neoliberal, but sometimes more liberal in a classical sense, also with the social side to it. So I'm, as I said, I look at it from the outside. I'm probably not the best person to answer this. I think my experience in Ukraine, I've been to Ukraine now for a couple of times, exploring this path. As soon as you say something that starts with social, there comes this "we don't want communism back again" thing. And I think still now, probably it's the last years of seeing that, but still some parties are in the perception of people affiliated still to old times that they don't want back. And we are in a time where this hyper-capitalism is taking over the world. And this hyper-individualization also is taking over the world. Not starting the whole social media story now, but this, you yourself, I mean, it's exactly the opposite of what we stand for in our say initial mindset, that you're not alone in the world, that you should support each other, that it's about community, not only about the individual. I think this is a mindset that is sort of an endangered species at the moment, and it is a vicious circle, because the more you have it, the more you try to find the solution in the extremism. You know, the more you get separated from feeling as a community, the more you say, I blame the other, instead of getting together and trying to find solutions together. I hope this hasn't been too abstract, but I think it is a very general problem that we are facing there, and that is very difficult to tackle.
Not at all abstract, I think very tangible and very relatable for so many in the different countries across the EU. But since we have already touched also the EU dimension, I mean, the elections have happened, and Katarina, you've just mentioned now, Tisza will be in charge. After the announcement of the elections, I think President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said now Hungary is at the heart of Europe. But we also know that it doesn't go from the moment that the polling station close one party is a winner and the relation improved unconditionally. I mean, you yourself, Katarina, I remember in 2022, you were among those members of the European Parliament who were saying, we cannot let the country off the hook if it does not respect the rule of law. Conditionality mechanism is there to preserve rule of law and democracy.
Let the government off the hook, not the country, the government. That's very important.
The government, of course, in that sense, but the government is the representative of the country in here. But now what we have the opening bilan, we know that the relationship between the EU and Hungary and the Orbán government has been very difficult. Every single summit, there was a crisis. So what is the expectation now? I mean, the Polish case was similar a little bit. We also very much cheered for the change, but then the reality hit and a certain step needed to be taken, the milestones needed to be achieved. So what is the expectations? How can there be a new relationship between the EU and the government of Peter Magyar, who, as you said yourself, is EPP and perhaps not exactly a Euro enthusiast himself?
Well, I see the whole of the European Union being very good-willing towards the new government, because also we know Peter Magyar because he's a colleague. We know how they have voted, the Tisza people. Not everything I like. And for example, he did vote against, and Tisza voted against the loan for Ukraine. But he already said that they won't stand in the way. So this is solved, but we can see the track record already because they have people here and they work with us, and I can say that some of them are really, really good colleagues and really good members of parliament that do good work. So I think the expectations are to have a constructive basis of cooperation, which I'm sure we will have. To have not always the same points of view, even within EPP. Tisza belongs to the groups that voted more often against the EPP line than others. There, of course, you have to see when it was maybe also tactical, not to give Orbán the possibility to denounce, for example, with LGBTI questions or whatever. And let's see how that will develop now. But with Poland, I mean, the situation is very different to Poland because of this 2/3 majority, of course. I mean, it's all in his hands. He can, at least from a legal perspective, he can change everything now, and that will be necessary and is expected to change a lot. But for example, joining EPPO, the European Public Prosecutor's Office, to do that in the first place, and he can do that very quickly, is a very strong signal, because corruption, of course, was one of the most criticized problems in this government, and so in Poland the money was released before especially the justice reforms had been sort of turned back. They still haven't, because it's not as easy, and I think one will give, I wouldn't say the benefit of the doubt, but rewards the effort and the commitment. I think that will also happen. Of course, there are three different types of programs that are being frozen, so it depends on different measures how to release the money. But I'm actually very, very positive. I just met a Dutch colleague in the foyer, and he said, "Oh, are we going to support them enough, the new government?" I think we're going to support them like crazy, especially if it's EPP. I mean, if it had been a liberal or a social democratic, I would say, let's see. But if it's EPP, I mean, it's the biggest group here. It's the group the Commission president belongs to. They will do everything to give him a good start. I'm quite sure.
That's the European part of the story, Esther, but there have been already some press conferences. Peter Magyar has already indicated what will be the first priorities he, while taking responsibility, as Katarina underlined, will want to see happening. So what can we expect internally from inside out, so to say?
Yeah, probably I will also refer back to some of what Katarina said, because actually if we can believe our eyes or his campaign, then he won over his social promises. So he's a conservative, and he's in EPP, but he won and he promised a lot on welfare and on making a functioning state, and he will have to deliver. This is also one of the reasons why he absolutely needs to get the EU funds unfrozen to be able to deliver. So that will be a big challenge in my view, because if he doesn't deliver relatively soon on the social promises, then he will soon lose support. I mean, at this moment, I couldn't tell how much time he has. Like, obviously, Hungary or those who voted for him are now euphoric that Orbán is gone, and he will definitely have some time to deliver on the social promises. But also it will be a challenge because I think the Tisza government will have the challenge within one government, what in Germany and in Austria they have in the coalition, namely very different economy philosophies within one group. And so how to make growth, from whom to take, whom to give. So the taxation policy, social policy, economic policy ideas have to be somehow reconciled or somehow negotiated. And what we know is István Kapitány, who should be, the economy minister, is more neoliberal than Orbán has ever had. So I think, and this will be a big challenge. I wouldn't say, he cannot succeed, because he succeeded in many things in the last 2 years where we had predicted food. That will be a big challenge. Yet if he doesn't deliver, if he will fail on social promises, that will be the room for protest movements, for all the new social democratic parties, for if that happens. So and just one sentence on the women, because I wouldn't say, I don't know enough about the US, so I will not comment on that. But at least for Tisza, it's a conservative party, but until now it doesn't look like as conservative or in the way conservative as Fidesz. Already 40% of his MPs are women, unprecedented in Hungary. The Tisza Islands, everybody who analyzes them, who understands them, says that actually women are very important organizers, and not just the one who cooks the coffee, but who are really the central forces in the networks and doing that. At least in the electoral program, there were very significant things at least promised on that level, which were more material. So not this symbolic gestures towards women. We like women, women are cool, but the elderly care, taking elderly care seriously, or this type of thing. If that would materialize, that would be a big step forward. As for the women, so I think the big challenge for a Tisza government will be what Ivan Krastev said, is the post-populist trilemma. He said that if a right-wing populist is followed by someone unpopulist Democrat, that has a challenge that he has to be fast, efficient, and legal. And if it's a trilemma, it means you can make only 2 of them at the same time. So he has to deliver quickly, and what he delivers should be efficient and working, but then it cannot be legal. Or if you are legal and fast, then probably it's not working. Or if it's legal and efficient, then probably it's not fast enough. So that will be a big challenge. But I think the even bigger challenge will be what I have already mentioned, is contradicting expectations also from the voters. So not only his team, not only within Tisza, there might be contradictions. You could also see it in their program. Very different philosophies and logics were combined to one program, but also the voters are have very different expectations, and sooner or later he will disappoint some of them. But at this moment, even when I say these words, it sounds like killing the joy, and it feels like it's not the moment to say why he will fail. Actually, he did something, like it's 2 days ago. We didn't know that he would win the election. So let's see. And actually, there is this, what gives us, or many of us, hope, is this social movement behind, so that it's not his person, it's not his past, it's not his political intuitions, but the social movement that helped him and Tisza win.
I think Katarina said a very important point when she said that here the elections are different than in Poland. In Poland, there is a multi-party government. The majority is not the super majority as 2/3 in Hungary. Now Tisza is in charge so much. I read the analysis that say that Constitutional Court could be addressed, the question of media freedom. And we have a question from the chat. So thank you very much for those of you who are following us diligently. What will happen indeed to media and the trade unions? Can they count on a quick change somehow that will reverse the illiberal mechanisms preventing freedom of speech, association? Can the trade unions be re-empowered? Esther?
Yes, actually 2-3 weeks before the elections, the biggest trade union confederation organized or tried to invite the party or the list leaders, or the party leaders, to negotiate what the different parties have to offer for employees, and Tisza didn't go. When journalists asked Péter Magyar why Tisza didn't think it's important to negotiate with the trade unionists, he said that he didn't even know about this request, he didn't see this invitation. So probably it was just in the campaign rush in the very end. Probably that would be my optimistic, trustful interpretation. The other option is that Tisza will not be more of a negotiating partner for trade unions than was Fidesz. And for the media, actually, that is also one of the big questions. So one of the main promises of Tisza is that the propaganda machinery will be turned off, that as soon as they get on power, the state TV or the public TV will be, for a time being, closed, as long as it is not filled with independent people. But already yesterday, Péter Magyar received an invitation from the public TV, which didn't happen all over the campaign, all over the last 2 years, whereas smear campaigns were spread all the time in public TV. So that's already an alignment, what we can see very quickly after the change. And they already talk about the Tisza victory, which it was unimaginable in the last years, how it became just a propaganda tool of Fidesz. And but one of the other concerns is this, and probably it will change after he won the elections. He was very, very, very rude towards the independent media in the last 2 years. His ideological explanation for that was that the independent media shouldn't behave as if we were already in a democracy, and shouldn't ask very critical questions and push him into answering difficult questions, because Fidesz can make smear campaigns against him out of that, from one sentence or one response. So that was his explanation why he talked aggressively to them, gave very little interviews. He didn't let his people to give interviews during the campaign and so on. But yesterday at this big international press conference, he let the Hungarian independent media ask questions, and only them. So immediately, also the foreign ones, but from Hungary, he was very he was respectful towards them. So that is still up to see what was his attitude because of the campaign and because of the very difficult situation under Fidesz resource asymmetry, and what he will keep for his rule. But I think he must deliver on the propaganda field, that public TV, public radio should be restored after these years of Fidesz media.
Thank you so much. I think we're coming to the moment where I would like to give Laszlo a possibility to conclude before completely closing this debate. I think it has been absolutely fascinating to listening to you both because we've touched on so many issues on the question of the campaign, and specifically here, I think Katarina framed it as we all enjoy the fact that the interference by J.D. Vance brought absolutely nothing. It's a massive signal for everyone that the people's determination to change the regime is stronger, that external interference might be. You've spoken about the campaign, but also the question of polarization and how the numbers were uncertain, both because of the electoral system and the question that this rural versus urban areas not always are well assessed. So this was, until the very last moment, a big question mark how it would turn, even if when the turnout has become more known during the day, it looked like that indeed the breakthrough for Tisza would be possible. You've spoken about a lot of promises that have been made. Katarina said very clearly, now we see it as the new opening. There will be support from the European Union for when the necessary steps will be taken. Whereby, Esther, you said there have been a lot of promises. The welfare issues have to be looked at, functioning states, and in order to deliver indeed the relationship with the EU and the unfrozening of the relations and means is very important. There's a lot of expectations. You've also said, the symbolic part is not only what we see in the headlines, but also the fact that Fidesz lost a number of strongholds. We didn't discuss that, but the symbolic conference of Peter Magyar in Debrecen used to be the stronghold of Fidesz, of course, had a big meaning. So, Laszlo, with all that we've heard about how the campaign went, what the elections brought, what is the bilan of the opening, what do you think we should leave this session with as an inspiration, hope, and perhaps precaution?
Well, thank you, Anya, for giving me the floor at the end. I think the conversation was a testimony that the weekend behind us was really thrilling. And there are so many issues that can be discussed, that need to be discussed in order to analyze not only this campaign and the election, but the whole 16 years of Orbán's rule. Which for many Hungarians, let's be honest, was a kind of long nightmare, which didn't want to end. And suddenly, thanks to this enormous mobilization, it has ended. And it has ended very, very abruptly. It's a shock. For most of us, it's a positive shock, of course. But we need to find out what happened. I think it's also interesting to see all different types of commentaries now. Everybody is now a Hungary expert, in Europe and in Brussels. So there will be also a lot to debunk. I collected 5 points, which a little bit connect with the conversation, but I also want to comment on the discourse around the Hungarian situation today from people who maybe first time pay attention to this country in the middle of Europe, geographically speaking. The first point is that very often people say that now populism has been defeated. I think, if I can be a little bit simplistic, but not very much, I think populism won. I think populism won over authoritarianism. Orbán has been a lot more authoritarian and nationalist rather than populist. And if you look at how Peter Magyar behaved and campaigned in the last 2 years, it's textbook populism. If you look at Jan Werner Müller about populism, or Kasmude, or other classics, what is the populist? The populist who contrasts pure people and the corrupt elites, offers simple solutions rather than outlining detailed policy solutions. This is what has been happening. This has been the recipe which has won. And the great success of this campaign on behalf of Peter Magyar is that he managed to turn this into a referendum on Orbán. And a lot of people just use this as an opportunity to send him home. So in a way, the expectation of many is that while this was a populistic campaign, they would govern as technocrats. And this is going to be interesting, whether this is possible at all. How they would start governing once the government is already in place. The second point I wanted to make is that indeed this big majority of the Hungarians which went to vote on Sunday wanted to vote for change, but not purely a change of a person or a change of a government or a change of the party, but Hungarians frame it, or many Hungarians frame it, as a change of the system. On Friday, 2 days before the election, there was an enormous concert attracting a lot of people, especially young people. It was also a concert for the change of the system. And this connects with Orbán's framing that since 2010, this has been a system of national cooperation. So he himself gave a name to his regime, and then people wanted to change the system. But this also connects with the whole political thinking of most Hungarians, I would say, since 1989, that you just need to change the system or complete the systemic change, and then the system will function. So the politician's role is just to complete the systemic change, and then the system will function. So I think this is going to cause a problem also in the future, as it has caused in the past, that many Hungarians do not think in terms of how a country needs to be governed, what kind of policies are needed to govern a country. The way of thinking is what kind of system we need, and the system would need to go. So this is something for the future to be monitored. The third point I wanted to make is that this enormous mobilization would not have happened without Generation Z in play, right? Since last summer, there were many countries from Nepal to Latin American ones with the Gen Z component. And this was also an enormous example of Gen Z mobilization. Young people in Hungary have been facing very meager economic opportunities, and then also a deterioration of the education system, the isolation of the Hungarian universities from the European Union because of the behavior of Orbán. And there was, this has been boiling from some time. Last summer already in the youth festivals, Dirty Fidesz was the slogan. Whoever was on stage, the young people were shouting Dirty Fidesz. And this, was boiling through the whole process. The Pride demonstration, which also was enormous, energized a youth resistance against Orbán's autocracy. And this needs to be seen because, for a long time, scientists, politicians were saying that, because Orbán controls so much of the media, 80% of the media, nothing is possible. Now, because of the new channels of communication, especially social media, the rise of the influencers, the demonstration of the influencers was also a milestone in this process, which led to the elections. And this is also something to be learned, how to cultivate, how to grow influencers in the new world, and potentially see this with a progressive angle, progressive way too. I think it was fascinating in the discussion, and I think we need another discussion to figure out why it was not the left which managed to replace Orbán, because there was a supply indeed of left, various center-left forces, green parties, but exactly because of the splits, right? You cannot have a fragmented opposition, a cavalcade, when the political system, the election system calls for unity. If unity is favored through the electoral system, you cannot have a fragmented landscape, especially with some toxic politicians carried from the past in the front row. This is not going to attract votes. This is not going to present an appetizing alternative for the audience. And indeed, the center-left kind of progressive disconnection from the young generation, despite some openings, some good efforts in developing social media profiles, also resulted in the erosion and marginalization rather than the empowerment of the progressive side, which obviously will have to be rebuilt in the coming 3 years before the European Parliament elections and the municipal elections. Something needs to happen. The fifth point and the closing for me is indeed the role of the European Union. And of course, this has been a subject of discussions. And a lot of people used to criticize the EU. Why the EU is not more, intervening, why not more forcefully, etc. I think the EU did its best to keep Hungary under pressure, to keep Orbán under pressure, to keep the autocracy under pressure, and in a way, withholding the funds since 22 has been very harsh. It's like shooting the hostage. It's causing economic damage. It has consequences on a country if investment funds are not arriving. And as the steps of democratization are now being made, and there are no barriers, there is a two-thirds majority, the country could be re-democratized relatively quickly with a state reform through a few months. I think the funds indeed would need to be unlocked as these steps are being made. The irony of history, in my view, is, as Katarina was explaining, the role of the European People's Party in this, in the current situation. But don't forget, until 2022, it was the EPP which covered up for Fidesz, which provided a protective shield that the EU and others could not intervene more forcefully and faster. And now who benefits from the anger against Orbán? The EPP. So somehow we also should find a way that also at EU level there would need to be consequences. This is a slogan now in Hungary that there must be consequences of bad behavior, but it's also bad behavior to cover up the villains of the autocrats, those who violate and undermine the rule of law. So this irony, I think, is something which we can further discuss, why it is happening this way at the EU. But I think it's very important that the EU seizes the momentum for a re-democratization and the re-Europeanization in Hungary, but it also needs to be told that the European integration has a social dimension. You cannot re-democratize without also redeveloping the social dimension of this integration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Laszlo. I think it's a brilliant final point also to showcase that there is still much to discuss and much ahead of us. Thank you so much for being with us today, and allow me to thank on behalf of all of you watching this fascinating debate, to thank Laszlo Andor, FEPS Secretary General, Katarina Bali, Vice President of the European Parliament and Vice President of the Party of European Socialists, Esther Kovacs, analyst and the Assistant Professor, University of Vienna, researcher. Let me thank also an amazing crew behind European Forum for Democracy and Solidarity, FEPS communication team, as well as Christian Zalm, who is in charge of the European Progressive Observatory, Jens and Julia, without whom this episode wouldn't have been possible. And while this episode has been definitely fascinating and I hope has intrigued you for further questions, do not hesitate to post them. We will be observing the post with the link to this episode, as well as keep on following us, because we will be coming with further discussions, as this is a super electoral year. So there will be plenty to unpack. And I'm leaving this session definitely with much of hope, even if we were unpacking that and sort of seeing the different thoughts here and there. Lasha, what you've said about the young generations and youth still being able to break through after years of saying how young people have been laid back. I think it's a fresh thing, and the politics has responsibility not only to respond to the people's hope, but also to deliver on the aspirations for now and for the future.